Advanced techniques enabled her to pin down the original source of the materials. She's helped by the fact that most of the cloth is wool.
There are a number of different diagnostic features of animal fibers that can be used to identify the animal from which it came, namely the diameter of the fiber, the shape of it in cross-section, the type of scale, the shape of the scale, and how it's arranged on the shaft of the fiber, and also the level of waviness or kinkiness to the fiber.
Under the powerful gaze of a scanning electron microscope, the shape and structure of each fiber becomes crystal clear. From this detailed picture, Irene can go on to identify the species of sheep that a fiber has come from. Analyzing her results, Irene soon realized that the wool of the mummy's clothes came from a sheep that could not have been found in China at that time.
Culturally, China was not involved with wool production or use until considerably later. The wools that were used by the mummies in the Tarim Basin, some of them were related to sheep and therefore of people that had a common ancestor, at least to ones that were used in Europe. So it's almost certainly coming in from the West.
If these were the mummies of visitors from the West, it was vitally important to know just when they had arrived. Could they really be as old as they seemed? In the laboratory, radiocarbon dating techniques were able to provide the answer. These people died about 4,000 years ago, almost 2,000 years before the Emperor Xin opened up the Silk Road. The presence of the mummies meant that there had been Western visitors in this remote part of China many centuries before we thought, proving that it wasn't only trade goods that had made the journey across Asia. And clearly the Silk Road traders were not breaking new ground, but following in the footsteps of their much earlier ancestors. The work at Petra and Angkor Wat showed how far-reaching and diverse the effects of trade can be. Now historians are accepting that very similar influences must have been stimulating cultures across Asia at least 4,000 years ago and possibly earlier. So the great civilizations of Asia had not grown up in isolation. The threads of trade had joined them from earliest times. Suddenly we're looking at an exchange of ideas, knowledge, and culture that we never suspected. East and West may well have more of a common history than either have imagined.
At first, they appear to be mere blocks of stone. Then faces emerge. And suddenly, there are dozens, hundreds, smiling inwardly, timeless, at peace. Who was this man? God? King? Buddha? His secret, and those who built this place, had lain hidden in the Cambodian jungle for 4 centuries. This mystery in stone exists in a place called Angkor, the great temple city of an empire long forgotten. That city still survives, embracing the people who live here today. In the last millennium, the fertile lands between India and China were fought over for centuries by rival kingdoms. in what are now called Vietnam, Laos, Thailand, and Cambodia. But in the year 802 AD, a new king ascended to the throne in Cambodia, establishing a dynasty that would last more than 600 years. His people were called the Khmer, as Cambodians still call themselves today. Angkor would become a city of more than 1 million people, larger than any European city at that time, the largest religious site in the world. And its great temples would be among the most exquisite achievements of religious art by any civilization. For the Khmer people believed that they were building, quite literally, heaven on earth. The Khmers already worshipped the great Hindu gods of India. But by the 9th century, the Khmer kings decided to make themselves gods as well, gods on earth. And so each king built himself a temple that would be an earthly gateway to heaven. The finest of these is Angkor Wat. Built in the 12th century, Angkor is actually a map in stone of the mythological Hindu cosmos. The 5 towers are Mount Meru, dwelling place of the gods. Surrounding the towers are corridors running a half-mile around, the wall of rock at the end of the earth. And finally, a great moat that represents the ocean at the edge of the universe. Unlike almost any other temple in the Khmer kingdom, Angkor Wat faces the setting sun in the west, indicating that the king meant this to be his final resting place. The stories of the Hindu book of myths, the Ramayana, are laced with tales of daily life from past ages. People still respond to these stories as if they happened just the other day. Full of folk wisdom and earthy humor, the Ramayana stories link these people to their rich past, preserving it for their generation and the ones to come. At Angkor, these same Hindu myths were carved on the corridor walls. Epic battles between gods and creation stories, like the churning of the Milky Sea, in which demons and gods joined forces to create the elixir of immortality. They are attended by hundreds of delicately carved apsaras, seductive nymphs who inhabit the heavens. Apsaras grace nearly every corridor and doorway on each level of Angkor Wat, in homage to their enduring art of courtly dance. These court dances dramatize many stories, like that of Sita, the beautiful wife of Rama, and their adventures in and beyond the royal court, always with good triumphant over the evil demons and other dark forces. The court of King Suryavarman, Angkor Wat's builder, was grand indeed. Processions were common. He even had a platform built at the east gate so that he could mount directly onto his elephant, no staircase needed. Looking out at the commanding views from the central tower, nearly 20 stories high, Suryavarman must have felt his kingdom was invincible. But only 25 years after his death, the city was sacked. In a surprise attack, a nation to the southeast, the Chams, razed Angkor while the new king, Jayavarman VII, was out of the country. Already in his 50s, Jayavarman was said to be a serious and devout man, stocky and plain of face. Unlike his Hindu predecessors, he had embraced the peaceful doctrines of Buddhism. The sacking of Angkor roused him. He returned not only to crush the Cham invaders, but to become the greatest Khmer builder of all time. When peace was restored, Jayavarman ordered an enormous new city to be built. Angkor Thom would be impregnable to attack. 54 stone warriors guard the south gate, 27 smiling gods and 27 scowling demons, dressed as the arch-enemy Chams. Looming above, a 20-foot tower with a king's smiling face stands watch. That image is Jayavarman's mysterious legacy at Angkor, for in the heart of the city, he built an extraordinary temple called the Bayon. Here, 54 stone towers loom out of the terraces, each carved with 4 enigmatic faces, 216 in all. Is it the face of Jayavarman, as some believe, for the likeness is strong? Or is it Buddha himself? In his 80s, he could look back on an unparalleled legacy of building, not only of temples, but of roads, travelers' inns, hospitals. Angkor teemed with life, reflected on the walls of the temples, a marvelous panorama of a past age. Hunters after birds, families preparing to barbecue, a woman giving birth. The rhythm of life follows the rhythm of the land, much as it did hundreds of years ago. At Angkor, the ancient Khmer kings built vast waterworks to trap the lakes in the monsoon season. Soon, the land was producing 3 and even 4 rice crops a year, creating a prosperous leisure class and an increasingly extravagant lifestyle at court. One of Jayavarman's temples alone required 18 high priests, 2,740 lower priests, and some 66,000 people to perform the services of the temple. Jayavarman built terraces ringed with great stone elephants where members of the court played polo against the commoners. Angkor's splendor became renowned throughout Asia. In the year 1296, some 70 years after Jayavarman's death, a Chinese envoy named Chow Tao Quan observed the Khmer court. He wrote of waiting women in flowered robes, carriages drawn by horses ornamented in gold, and magnificent court spectacles of music and dance. Like this telling of the story of Hanuman, the monkey god, and his effort to rescue the beautiful Sita from the demon's palace. But while the fame of the Khmer court spread across Asia, Cambodians were gradually embracing the teachings of Buddha, which taught that the end of suffering comes from the individual and not from powerful gods and their royal counterparts on the throne of Angkor. Eventually, the lavish temples became merely the folly of princes, their extravagant upkeep straining the treasury. New rulers neglected Angkor's costly reservoirs and canals. Crops failed. Mosquitoes breeding in the stagnant pools spread malaria. The empire was vulnerable. And in 1432, it was crushed for the last time. Invading armies from Siam destroyed the great city of Angkor, dragging booty and slaves back to their capital. They left the great temples to be devoured by the jungle. 4 centuries later, French archaeologists deliberately left one of the ruins just as they found it, a vivid reminder of the threat of Angkor's deterioration. The temple of Ta Prohm, built by Jayavarman as a tribute to his mother, is now half consumed by tree roots, strong enough to split the stones. In the nearby town of Siem Reap, Cambodian preservationists restore Buddha figures, rescuing them from the encroaching jungle and the predations of terrorists and vandals that have plagued Cambodia in this war-torn century. Their work here is not merely craft, it is an act of faith. During the 1970s, the Khmer Rouge tried to eradicate traditional art and culture by a reign of terror. But the Khmer people have succeeded in reviving their ancient arts, handed down by masters, even to the youngest generation who are keeping their traditions alive.